The sound of shattering glass pierces through our usually quiet home, followed by my mother-in-law's shrill voice. I freeze at the front door, keys still dangling from my fingers, wondering if I should just turn around and head back to work. I'm Adriana, and until 3 weeks ago, my life was beautifully ordinary. Now it's a minefield of passive-aggressive comments and mounting tension, all because my in-laws lost everything in a failed investment scheme and moved into our guest room. "This window was perfectly fine before you started meddling with it, Ryan." Karen's voice echoes through the foyer. "If you had just listened to your father." "Mom, please," Ryan interrupts. "I was trying to fix the draft you kept complaining about." I step inside, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. The argument stops abruptly. 3 heads turn toward me, Ryan looking relieved, Karen's lips pursed in disapproval, and Thomas pretending to be deeply interested in his phone. "You're home early," Karen says, her tone suggesting I'm interrupting something important. "Client meeting got canceled." I survey the scene. Shattered glass everywhere, the living room window now sporting a gaping hole, and my husband clutching a screwdriver like it's evidence in a crime scene. "Well, since you're here," Karen continues, "perhaps you can explain why your windows are so poorly maintained. In our old house." "So, our old house that we lost because you trusted that con artist?" Thomas suddenly snaps, making Karen flinch. The room goes deadly quiet. I watch Ryan's face contort with discomfort, that familiar expression he gets whenever his parents start picking at old wounds. He's been wearing it more frequently lately. "I'll call someone to fix it," I say, reaching for my phone. "We can't afford a professional," Karen interjects. "Ryan can do it." "Ryan has work," I counter, feeling my jaw tighten. "And this needs to be done properly." "Are you suggesting my son isn't capable?" "I'm suggesting my husband has other responsibilities." Ryan steps between us, glass crunching under his feet. "Mom, Adriana's right. I should focus on work. We need the income, especially now." The "especially now" hangs in the air like smoke, choking us all with its implications. Karen's face reddens, and Thomas finally looks up from his phone, his expression darkening. "Of course," Karen says softly, dangerously. "Heaven forbid we inconvenience your precious routine. Though you seem to forget who paid for your college education, Ryan." "That's enough," I snap, surprising myself with the edge in my voice. "I'm calling the window repair service. End of discussion." As I dial the number, I catch Karen whispering to Ryan. "She's always been controlling, hasn't she? I warned you about marrying someone so dominant." My fingers tighten around the phone. 3 weeks. It's been only 3 weeks of their presence in our home, and already I feel something dark taking root inside me. Something that wants to remind Karen exactly who owns this house, who pays the bills, who actually has control here. "They can come tomorrow morning," I announce, ending the call. "It'll be $800. $800? Thomas explodes. "That's highway robbery." "Then maybe next time you'll let professionals handle home repairs instead of breaking our windows," I reply sweetly, watching Karen's face contort with rage. As I head upstairs to change, I hear them resume arguing in harsh whispers. Ryan's footsteps follow me, and I know what's coming. Another plea for patience, another reminder that they're family, another promise that this is temporary. But standing in our bedroom, looking at the family photos on the wall, I make a decision. This isn't about a broken window. It's about boundaries, respect, and power. And if they want to play games in my house, they're about to learn that I can play too. I just need to decide how far I'm willing to go to teach them that lesson. The moving boxes multiply like cancer cells, spreading through our once pristine guest room. I stand in the doorway, watching Karen arrange her crystal figurines on every available surface, while Thomas grunts and pushes furniture against walls that were never meant to accommodate their life's possessions. "This room really is quite small," Karen says, not looking at me. "And the lighting is terrible for my collection." I dig my nails into my palm. "It's a guest room, Karen. It wasn't designed to be a permanent residence." She places another crystal swan on the dresser, precisely adjusted to catch what little light she deems acceptable. "Well, we'll just have to make do. though I noticed that office of yours is significantly larger. That office pays for this house, I reply, the words sharp enough to make her pause. Thomas emerges from behind a tower of boxes, his face flushed. Karen, leave it alone. We're not in a position to. I'm simply making an observation. She cuts him off, her voice honey-sweet. After all, family should be able to have honest discussions. The doorbell rings, saving me from whatever honest discussion she's trying to provoke. I find Lisa on the porch, holding a casserole dish and wearing her concerned neighbor expression. I brought dinner, she says, following me to the kitchen. Figured you could use a break from cooking for an army. I almost laugh at her choice of words. An army would be more organized, more disciplined. This is more like hosting a guerrilla insurgency. How bad is it? She whispers, helping me gather plates. Before I can answer, Karen appears in the doorway. Oh, Lisa, how thoughtful. Though Adriana knows I'm on a restricted diet. All those carbs. She sighs dramatically. But don't worry, dear. I can make do with a small portion. Lisa shoots me a look that screams, now I get it, as Karen bustles around the kitchen, rearranging things to her liking. When she reaches for my grandmother's antique serving bowl, something in me snaps. Don't touch that, I say, my voice low but firm. Karen freezes, bowl in hand. I was just. Put it back. The kitchen goes silent. Even the hum of the refrigerator seems to hold its breath. Adriana. Ryan's voice comes from behind me, gentle but warning. I hadn't heard him come in. Karen sets the bowl down with exaggerated care. I see I'm not welcome in this kitchen. My own son's kitchen. Her eyes water on cue. I'll just go help your father, Ryan, though my back has been giving me such trouble. Ryan moves to follow her, but I grab his arm. Don't. She's trying, Adriana. Trying to what? Take over our home? Criticize everything I do? Make me feel like an intruder in my own house? They lost everything, he reminds me, as if I could forget. As if they'd let me forget. And now they're trying to take everything from us instead. Lisa clears her throat. I should probably go. No, I say, perhaps too forcefully. Stay, please. We eat in uncomfortable silence, broken only by Karen's occasional sighs and Thomas's gruff attempts at small talk. Ryan keeps shooting me pleading looks, but I focus on my plate, pushing food around while my mind races with calculations. The mortgage payment is due next week, the property taxes the week after, and now we're feeding 4 instead of 2, heating rooms that used to stay closed, using utilities at twice the rate. I wonder if Karen and Thomas have even considered these things, or if they're too wrapped up in their own losses to see what they're doing to us. After dinner, I find Karen in the guest room, holding a framed photo from their old house. For a moment, she looks smaller, older, and I almost feel sorry for her. Then she speaks. You know, Ryan always wanted a bigger house, like the one we had. But I suppose with your modest income, this was all you could manage. The pity evaporates. I step into the room, close enough to make her look up. Let me be very clear, Karen. This is my house. You're here because we're being kind, not because you have any right to be. Remember that. I turn to leave, but her voice stops me. You really have no idea what family means, do you? No, Karen, I say without turning around. I know exactly what it means, and soon you're going to learn too. I close the door on her response, already planning my next move. If she wants to play the family card, fine. I think it's time to call Ryan's grandmother Evelyn. She's always had such interesting stories about Karen's past. The bank statement sits heavy in my hands, its numbers burning into my retinas like acid. I've checked it 3 times now, but the truth doesn't change. Someone has been making unauthorized transfers from our retirement account. Small amounts at first, growing bolder over the past month. The dates line up perfectly with Karen and Thomas's arrival. My phone buzzes, a text from Lisa. Coffee? You sound stressed. I ignore it, scrolling through the transaction history again. Each withdrawal feels like a personal betrayal, not just of our money, but of our trust. The front door opens, and Ryan's footsteps echo through the house. I hear Karen's voice immediately attached to him like a parasite. Sweetheart, did you remember to look into that investment opportunity your father mentioned? I step into the hallway, bank statement crushed in my fist. Actually, let's talk about investments. Ryan's smile fades as he reads my expression. Karen keeps her plastered-on grin, but her eyes narrow slightly. Who has access to our retirement account, Ryan? The silence that follows is deafening. Karen's face doesn't change, but her hands begin fidgeting with her necklace, a nervous tell I've noticed over the past weeks. Only us, Ryan says slowly. Why? I spread the crumpled papers on the hallway table. Then perhaps you can explain these transfers? Ryan leans over the statement, his face draining of color. Karen peers over his shoulder, her expression carefully neutral. Oh, those, she says lightly. Ryan gave us his password when we needed help with some temporary expenses, just until our assets are unfrozen. The casual way she admits it makes my blood boil. You gave them access without telling me? Ryan straightens up, running a hand through his hair, his guilty gesture. It was just supposed to be for emergencies, Mom said. Of course she did. I turn to Karen. How much have you taken so far? Taken? Karen's voice rises an octave. We borrowed with every intention of repaying. Really, Adriana, your attitude about family is quite concerning. Family doesn't steal. Steal? Thomas appears from the guest room, his face thunderous. Watch your accusations, young lady. Or what? I step closer to him. You'll lose our money too, like you lost yours? That's enough. Ryan moves between us. Mom, Dad, we need to talk about this. These withdrawals have to stop. But sweetheart, Karen's eyes well up with tears. We have nowhere else to turn. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done? I laugh, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You mean like moving in uninvited, criticizing every aspect of our lives, and now stealing our savings? We raised him, Thomas roars. We put him through college. And now you're bankrupting him to pay for your mistakes. Ryan grabs my arm. Adriana, please. I wrench away from him. No. Choose, Ryan, right now. Choose between enabling their theft or protecting our future. Karen's tears vanish instantly. How dare you make him choose between his parents and his parents who've been secretly draining his accounts? Ryan looks between us, his face a mask of torment. I can't. We need time to figure this out. Figure what out? I grab my keys from the table. They stole from us, Ryan, while living under our roof, and you're still defending them. Where are you going? His voice cracks slightly. To the bank, to remove your access to our accounts. Karen gasps. You can't do that. Watch me. As I reach the door, Ryan calls out, Adriana, wait, we can talk about this. I turn back one last time, taking in the tableau. Ryan's desperate expression, Karen's calculating glare, Thomas's clenched fists. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice the moment you gave them that password. The door slams behind me with satisfying force. In my car, my hands shake as I dial Lisa's number. Remember that coffee you offered? Make it something stronger. As I pull out of the driveway, I catch a glimpse of Karen in the window, already whispering in Ryan's ear. Fine. If they want to play family politics, I know someone who wrote the book on it. Time to pay grandmother Evelyn a visit. Let's see how Karen handles her past coming back to haunt her. Lisa pours another glass of wine as I finish telling her about the bank visit. So you really did it? Locked him out completely? Had to. The wine burns going down, but not enough to dull the ache in my chest. You should have seen the banker's face when I showed her the unauthorized transfers. My phone buzzes again. The 15th call from Ryan in 2 hours. I silence it without looking. Have you talked to Evelyn yet? Lisa asks, refilling my glass. Before I can answer, a sharp knock at her front door makes us both jump. Through the window, I spot Thomas's hulking figure on the porch. Don't answer it, I whisper, but Lisa's already moving. Thomas barges in the moment the door cracks open. We need to talk, Adriana, now. Nothing to talk about. I stay seated, gripping my wine glass like a weapon. Ryan's a mess. Karen's beside herself. Is this what you wanted? What I wanted! The laugh that escapes me sounds foreign, almost hysterical. What I wanted was not to have my in-laws steal from me while living under my roof. We lost everything! His voice cracks, and for the first time, I see real fear in his eyes. Our house, our savings, our reputation, all gone, because I trusted the wrong person. Do you have any idea what that's like? And now you're doing the same thing to us. He slumps against the wall, suddenly looking every bit his age. There are things you don't understand. Things we haven't told Ryan. Like what? The investment scheme. It wasn't just our money we lost. He pulls out his phone, hands shaking as he shows me an email. We borrowed from some people. Bad people. They're getting impatient. The threat in the email makes my blood run cold. No wonder they've been so desperate for cash. Does Ryan know about this? Thomas shakes his head. Karen won't let me tell him. Says it would destroy him to know how far we've fallen. But stealing from him is better? We're protecting him. You're destroying him. I stand up, wine sloshing over the rim of my glass. And you're destroying us in the process. My phone buzzes again, this time with a text from Ryan. Please come home. We need to talk. Thomas sees the message, and something in his expression shifts. Karen's right. You never understood family loyalty. Loyalty? I step closer, lowering my voice. You want to talk about loyalty? Then tell Ryan the truth. All of it. Or I will. You wouldn't dare. Try me! I grab my purse, heading for the door. You have until tomorrow morning. If you do this, Thomas calls after me, there's no going back. Karen will never forgive you. I pause in the doorway. Maybe that's exactly what I'm counting on. Outside, the night air hits me like a slap. Lisa follows me to my car. What are you going to do? First, I'm going to see Evelyn. Then, I start the engine, feeling strangely calm. Then I'm going to burn Karen's perfect family facade to the ground. Adriana. Lisa hesitates. Just be careful. Revenge has a way of hurting everyone involved. I think of Ryan's text, of Thomas's fear, of Karen's manipulations. Sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen. Driving away, I catch Thomas in my rearview mirror, already on his phone. No doubt warning Karen. Let him. I've spent weeks playing defense in my own home, watching them chip away at my marriage, my security, my peace. No more. My phone rings again. Ryan. This time I answer, but say nothing. Adriana? His voice sounds rough, desperate. Please come home. Mom's talking about leaving. Dad's acting strange. Everything's falling apart. Good, I say softly. Let it fall. I hang up before he can respond and dial another number. It rings twice before a familiar voice answers. Grandmother Evelyn? We need to talk about Karen. Yes, it's time. Tell me everything. Evelyn's living room feels like stepping into another era, all antique furniture and faded photographs. She sets down her teacup with deliberate precision, her eyes sharp despite her age. Karen always was a master at playing victim, she says, sliding an old envelope across the coffee table. But she learned from the best. Inside are photographs I've never seen before. Karen in her younger years, standing beside a man who isn't Thomas. Documents with familiar signatures. Bank statements showing patterns I recognize all too well. She did this before? My hands shake as I spread the evidence across the table. To Thomas's brother, James. Destroyed his business, his marriage, everything. Thomas never knew. He always believed James gambled it all away. A knock at the front door makes us both freeze. Through the window, I spot Ryan's car in the driveway. Perfect timing, Evelyn murmurs, rising slowly. I called him. You what? She opens the door before I can stop her. Ryan steps in, looking exhausted and angry until he spots me. Then his face just looks hurt. Grandmother? He glances between us. What's going on? Sit down, dear. Evelyn's voice carries an authority that brooks no argument. There are things about your mother you need to know. If this is about the money, Ryan starts. It's about patterns, I cut in, spreading the photos across the table. Look familiar? His face pales as he pieces it together. That's Uncle James. But Mom said he abandoned the family? Gambled everything away? Evelyn's laugh is bitter. Karen's quite good at rewriting history. Ryan picks up a photo, his hands trembling slightly. Why are you showing me this? Because they're doing it again, I say softly. To us. To you. Did you know they borrowed money from loan sharks? I continue when he doesn't respond. That's why they've been so desperate for cash. They're not just stealing from us. They're putting us in danger. Ryan stands abruptly, pacing the room. This is insane. Mom wouldn't. Like she wouldn't steal from our retirement fund? The words come out sharper than intended. His phone buzzes. Karen's face lights up the screen. He stares at it, conflicted. Answer it, Evelyn suggests. But put it on speaker. Ryan hesitates, then accepts the call. Mom? Ryan, thank goodness! Karen's voice fills the room, frantic. You need to come home right now. Your father's having chest pains, and Adriana's locked us out of everything. We can't even call an ambulance. My laugh surprises even me. Interesting, since I just saw Thomas at Lisa's house. Perfectly healthy. Silence crackles over the line. Mom! Ryan's voice breaks slightly. What's going on? Adriana's poisoning you against us, Karen hisses. Just like she poisoned your grandmother. They're conspiring. Like you conspired against James? Evelyn interrupts coldly. The silence that follows is deafening. Ryan, sweetheart. Karen's voice turns syrupy. Whatever they're telling you. Is it true? Ryan demands. About Uncle James? I did what I had to do to protect our family. By destroying his? Everything I've ever done has been for you. Ryan ends the call, his hands shaking. He turns to me, eyes haunted. What do we do now? Before I can answer, my phone chimes with a text from Lisa. Thomas just left. He was making calls about selling something big. Said it was his last chance. We end this, I say, gathering the evidence. Tonight. How? Ryan asks. Evelyn touches my arm gently. Remember, dear, revenge is a poison that affects everyone who touches it. Sometimes poison is exactly what's needed. I reply, watching Ryan's face harden with resolution. To cut out what's killing you. As we leave Evelyn's house, another text comes through, from an unknown number. Payment due, tomorrow, or everyone pays. I show it to Ryan, watching the last of his doubts crumble. Ready? I ask. He takes my hand, squeezing it tight. Let's finish this. Behind us, Evelyn watches from her window, her expression unreadable. I wonder if she sees herself in me, or if she's remembering her own battles with Karen. Either way, there's no turning back now. The war's about to go from cold to nuclear. The house feels like a powder keg when Ryan and I return. Karen and Thomas are waiting in the living room, their faces set in matching masks of righteous indignation. The envelope of evidence weighs heavy in my hands. Finally decided to come home? Karen's voice drips with false concern. We were worried sick. No more games, Mom. Ryan's voice is steady, but I feel his hand trembling against mine. We know everything. Know what, exactly? Thomas stands, his bulk casting a shadow across the room. That your wife's turned you against us? That she's poisoned? I slam the envelope onto the coffee table. Photos and documents spill out like accusations. About Uncle James, about the loan sharks, about all of it. Karen's face doesn't change, but her fingers twitch, that telltale nervous gesture. Ancient history, lies and misunderstandings. Like the misunderstanding with our retirement account? I step closer. Or the misunderstanding about Thomas's chest pains? We did what we had to do, Thomas growls. You have no idea what it's like to lose everything. Because of your own choices, Ryan explodes. And now you're dragging us down with you. A sharp knock at the door freezes us all. Through the window, I spot two men in dark suits. My blood runs cold as Thomas's face drains of color. "Who are they?" Ryan demands. "Nobody," Thomas says quickly. Too quickly. Karen moves toward the door, but I block her path. "The loan sharks. Is that who you brought into our home?" "We can explain," she starts, but the knocking becomes pounding. "Open up, Thomas. Time's up." Ryan grabs his phone, but Karen snatches it away. "Don't you dare call the police. This is family business." "Family?" I laugh, the sound bordering on hysteria. "You call this family?" The back door crashes open. The men enter like shadows, all business suits and barely concealed threats. The taller one smiles, all teeth and no warmth. "Thomas, Karen, time to settle up." "We just need a little more time," Thomas pleads, suddenly looking old and broken. "Time's not what we're here for." The man's eyes scan the room, landing on Ryan. "Though maybe your son would like to help with the debt?" "Don't you dare!" I step in front of Ryan, but Karen moves faster. Yes, he'll help. He has access to funds." "No." Ryan's voice cuts through the room like steel. "I won't." "You ungrateful." Thomas starts forward, but the second man blocks his path. "Tick-tock," he says softly. "Our boss isn't known for patience." I watch Karen's face, seeing the wheels turn behind her eyes. She's going to do it. She's going to sacrifice her own son to save herself. "Ryan has a trust fund," she blurts out. "From his grandfather. He never told anyone, but I found the papers." The world seems to tilt. Ryan stares at his mother in horror. "That was for my children's education." "We're your parents." "Not anymore." The words fall like stones in the silence. The men exchange glances. Family drama's not our concern. Payment tonight, or things get unpleasant. They leave as quietly as they came, but their presence lingers like smoke. Karen immediately turns to Ryan, reaching for him. "Sweetheart, please. We can fix this." "Fix it." His laugh sounds like breaking glass. "Like you fixed Uncle James's life? Or our retirement account? Or my trust fund? Everything I did was for you." "No," I step between them. "Everything you did was for yourself. And now you've lost it all anyway." Karen's face twists into something ugly. "You think you've won? You think exposing old secrets makes you powerful?" She pulls out her phone. "Let's see how powerful you feel when Ryan learns what his perfect wife has been hiding." My heart stops as she pulls up an email, one I'd written to Lisa months ago, detailing thoughts of leaving Ryan during a rough patch. Words written in anger and frustration, never sent, but saved in drafts. "Where did you really should change your passwords more often, dear." Ryan's face goes blank as he reads. The silence stretches like a chasm between us. "Now who's the manipulator?" Karen's smile is victorious. I reach for Ryan, but he steps back. In his eyes, I see every doubt, every fear, every whispered poison Karen has planted taking root. The loan sharks want payment tonight. Karen has turned my own words against me. And Ryan, the one person I was fighting for, looks at me like I'm a stranger. Sometimes, when you're fighting monsters, you don't realize you're becoming one yourself. The loan sharks give us until midnight. Ryan disappears into his study, leaving me alone with Karen's triumphant smile and Thomas's nervous pacing. But they've forgotten one thing. I still have Evelyn's number. One call is all it takes. The doorbell rings at 11:45. Karen opens it, then stumbles backward as Evelyn sweeps in, followed by a distinguished man in an expensive suit. "James?" Thomas goes pale. "What are you—" "Hello, brother." James's voice is quiet, but it fills the room. "Evelyn tells me you're in trouble again." Ryan emerges from his study, staring at the uncle he hasn't seen in 15 years. "Uncle James?" "The prodigal gambler," Karen sneers, but there's fear in her eyes. "Come to gloat?" James pulls out his phone, showing an email. "No, Karen. I came to repay an old debt. To your loan sharks. The same ones you sent after me all those years ago." The room goes still. Thomas turns to Karen slowly. "What is he talking about?" "She never told you?" James laughs softly. How she orchestrated my downfall? Set up the gambling debts? Convinced you I was stealing from the family business? That's ridiculous, Karen sputters. Thomas, he's lying. Like you lied about his chest pains today? I cut in. Or about Ryan's trust fund? Everything I did was to protect this family. No! Evelyn's voice cracks like a whip. Everything you did was to control it, just like your mother tried to control me. The loan sharks return at midnight sharp. James handles the transaction quietly, efficiently. When it's done, he turns to his brother. The debt's cleared, but there's a cost. Thomas nods slowly, finally understanding. Karen? She backs away, looking for allies, but finds none. Ryan stands beside me now, his earlier doubts replaced by cold certainty. The email she used to manipulate him lies forgotten. Just words written in a moment of weakness, nothing compared to years of calculated destruction. It's over, Ryan says quietly. Get out. You can't mean that. Karen's voice breaks. We're your parents. Parents don't destroy their children to save themselves. He takes my hand. Get out of our house. Thomas! Her voice rises, desperate. Tell them I did it all for us. But Thomas just looks tired. No, Karen, you did it all for you. And now I need to find my brother. The transformation is instant. Karen's mask of maternal concern shatters, revealing something ugly beneath. You're all ungrateful. I gave everything. You took everything, James corrects. And now you have nothing. She lunges for her phone, probably to call another flying monkey from her network of enablers. But Evelyn moves faster, snatching it away. Enough, Karen. It's time to reap what you've sown. Thomas gathers their essential belongings, while Karen rages, threatens, pleads. When James offers them temporary shelter, separate rooms, separate lives, Thomas accepts quietly. Karen has no choice but to follow, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. As they leave, Ryan stops his father at the door. Dad? Thomas turns, looking ancient in the porch light. I'm sorry, Ryan says softly, for not seeing it sooner. No. Thomas glances at Karen, already in James's car. I'm sorry for seeing it and choosing to stay blind anyway. After they're gone, Evelyn touches my cheek gently. You did well, dear. But remember, victory and vindication aren't always the same thing. She leaves with James, leaving Ryan and me alone in our reclaimed home. The silence feels different now. Cleaner somehow, but heavy with consequence. That email, I start, but Ryan shakes his head. We all have moments of doubt. The difference is what we choose to do with them. He looks around our living room, at the spaces where Karen's crystal figurines once stood. They chose to destroy. We chose to protect. And now we rebuild. He pulls me close. But first, we change all our passwords. I laugh, but it catches in my throat. We've won, but victory tastes bittersweet. Karen and Thomas's destruction was their own doing, yet I played my part in orchestrating their downfall. The satisfaction I expected feels hollow, tempered by the knowledge that revenge, even justified, leaves its own kind of damage. But as Ryan holds me, I realize some things need to break completely before they can heal properly. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let the poison bleed out, even if it stains your hands in the process. The crystal swan sits in a cardboard box, wrapped in newspaper, the last remnant of Karen's presence in our home. I've been avoiding it for days, unsure whether to trash it or return it. Keep it, Evelyn says from my doorway, making me jump. She enters without waiting for an invitation, settling into my kitchen chair like it's her throne. As a reminder. Of what? How revenge tastes. Of how easily we become what we fight against. She pulls out an old photograph. Karen as a young woman, standing beside Evelyn. They're both smiling. She was like you once, fierce, protective, ready to burn down the world to save what she loved. I'm nothing like her. No? Evelyn's eyes are sharp. I watched you dismantle her life with the same precision she once used on others, the same techniques I taught her, that my mother-in-law taught me. The crystal swan feels heavier in my hands. Why are you telling me this now? Because victory without awareness is just another defeat waiting to happen. She takes the swan, turning it in the light. I didn't just help you because Karen deserved punishment. I helped because I saw myself in you, in your rage, your determination. And I saw Karen in your methods. The front door opens, and Ryan's footsteps approach. He pauses in the doorway, looking between us. Everything okay? Your grandmother was just leaving, I say. But Evelyn doesn't move. Thomas called, she announces instead. He's filing for divorce. Ryan's face remains carefully neutral. Good for him. And Karen? Living with her sister, telling anyone who'll listen how we destroyed her life. Evelyn's smile is sad. The same story I told about my mother-in-law. The same story she'll tell about you. The difference is, we were right, I insist, but the words feel hollow. Were we? Evelyn stands slowly. Or did we just tell ourselves that to justify becoming exactly what we claim to hate? She places the swan back in my hands and moves toward the door. Remember, dear, the most dangerous poison is the kind you don't realize you're drinking. After she leaves, Ryan and I stand in silence, the crystal swan between us like a curse. She's wrong, I say finally. We protected ourselves, protected our future. Did we? Ryan picks up the photograph Evelyn left behind. Or did we just prove that revenge runs in the family? I think of Karen's face that final night, of the satisfaction I felt watching her world crumble, of how easily manipulation came to me, how natural it felt to pull the strings of destruction. What if it's both? I place the swan on our mantel, where it catches the light differently than it did in the guest room. What if protecting what we love sometimes means becoming something we hate? Ryan wraps his arms around me from behind, both of us staring at the crystal swan. Then we make sure we recognize the moment it starts changing us, before we end up with our own collection of broken things and burned bridges. My phone buzzes, a text from Lisa asking if we want to join her family for dinner. Normal life, trying to reassert itself. But nothing feels normal anymore. We've won our house back, our peace back, our lives back. Yet something else has taken root in the spaces Karen and Thomas left behind. A knowledge of our own capacity for darkness. A recognition of how thin the line is between protection and destruction. We should get rid of it, I say, reaching for the swan. No? Ryan stops my hand. Let's keep it, as a warning. I lean back into his embrace, watching the light fracture through the crystal, casting shadows and rainbows across our walls. In its facets, I see Karen's smile, Thomas's defeat, Evelyn's knowing eyes. I see myself, reflected and refracted, both victor and victim of my own revenge. The swan stays on our mantle, not as a trophy of victory, but as a reminder of how easily righteousness can become ruthlessness, how protecting what we love can twist into destroying what we hate. A beautiful, dangerous thing, catching the light just so, warning us to watch for the shadows we cast while standing in the sun. Some poisons, after all, come in crystal containers.
I'm Jennifer. Today was supposed to be a throwback to simpler times, hanging out at the amusement park with my bestie, Rachel. We were all about reliving those carefree childhood moments, scoffing down cotton candy, and screaming our heads off on roller coasters. As we stood in line for the Ferris wheel, a little boy in front of us was bouncing around, barely able to contain his excitement. He was with this guy, around my age, trying to keep the kid from darting off into the crowd. "Liam, buddy, stay close, okay?" the guy said, his voice calm but firm. The kid, Liam, nodded, but his attention was all over the place. I couldn't help but smile. The scene was too familiar, reminding me of outings with my younger cousins. Rachel nudged me, whispering, "Hey, he's kinda cute, don't you think?" I shrugged, trying not to look too interested. Who? The kid or the guy? Very funny. The guy, obviously. We got on the Ferris wheel, and as fate would have it, those two ended up in the compartment next to us. From up high, with the world shrinking away, the guy and I exchanged smiles. He had this easy, open face that made you trust him right away. Once we were back on solid ground, Rachel, ever the wingman, dragged me towards them under the guise of helping Liam find his dropped toy car near the exit. "Thanks for helping out," the guy said as we handed the toy back to Liam. "No problem. He's your son?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He chuckled. "Nephew. I'm Jake, by the way, and this whirlwind is Liam." "Jennifer," I said, shaking his hand. "And the lifesaver over there is Rachel." Rachel waved, and Liam tugged on Jake's shirt, asking for ice cream. Jake looked at us, a bit hesitant, then made an offer. "How about we all grab some ice cream together? My treat." "Only if we get the biggest cones." Rachel jumped in, and we all laughed, making our way to the nearest ice cream stand. As Jake managed Liam's hyper-energetic ice cream requests, I saw a different side to him. He was patient, kind, and surprisingly easy to talk to. We started chatting about random things, favorite movies, worst amusement park rides, and how neither of us can stand clowns. "So, you come here often?" Jake asked, his tone teasing. "Only when I feel nostalgic or when someone drags me out," I replied, nudging Rachel, who was busy demolishing her double scoop. We spent the rest of the day together, wandering from ride to ride, sharing stories and laughs. As the park lights began to glow against the dusk, Jake pulled out his phone. "Can I get your number? I'd love to do this again, maybe without the wild rides and sugar highs next time." I felt a warm flush of excitement as I typed my number into his phone. "Sure, that sounds great." He grinned. "Great. I'll call you." And he did. The very next day. After Jake called, things between us moved pretty fast, like we were both sure this was it. The dates turned into weekends together, and those weekends turned into an easy routine of just knowing where each other fit. Before we even realized it, we were talking about forever. The day Jake proposed was as simple and beautiful as everything else with him had been. No dramatic gestures, just us on a quiet evening walk. "Jennifer," he started, stopping mid-path and looking a bit nervous, which wasn't like him at all. "I've been thinking a lot about us." "Yeah?" I asked, feeling my heart start to race a bit. "I don't want to scare you off or anything, but I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" He pulled out a ring, not flashy, but perfect. My heart skipped. "Of course, I will, you goof. I thought you'd never ask." The wedding was small, just close friends and family. His parents, Mike and Susan, were everything you'd hope for. Warm, welcoming, they made me feel like I'd been part of the family for years. Susan hugged me tight the first time we met, whispering, "We're so glad he found you." But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Jake's sister, Sarah, was a different story. She was polite enough at the wedding, but I could feel the chill off her. She didn't make it easy, always keeping a bit of distance, her words polite but cold. A few months into the marriage, during a Sunday dinner at Jake's parents' house, I tried to break the ice with her. "Sarah, I was thinking maybe we could go shopping sometime, get to know each other better." She looked up, a bit surprised, then masked it with a polite smile. "Maybe. We'll see. I'm pretty busy these days." Her husband, Tom, chimed in with a chuckle. "Busy? Babe, you spend more time at the gym than you do at home." Sarah shot him a look that could curdle milk. Some of us care about staying healthy. Life after the wedding felt like it was on fast forward. Me and Jake, we were solid, and soon enough, we got the news that would change everything. I was pregnant. The excitement, it was something else. We were gonna have a baby, our own little family expanding. "Jake, are you ready to be a dad?" I joked one night as we sat on the couch, my feet in his lap while he read some or other manual on baby stuff. "Are you kidding? I was born ready. This kid's gonna have the best dad ever." He shot back with a grin. "Yeah, right. Just wait till it's your turn for diaper duty at 3 a.m., I teased. When Johnny was born, it was like a piece of the universe just clicked into place. He was perfect, you know? All those cliches about parents falling in love the moment they see their baby, they're all true. But life, it doesn't always play fair. Johnny was 8 when we got the kind of news that just floors you. Leukemia. It hit us like a freight train. Everything else stopped. Nothing else mattered but getting our boy through this. Jake was a rock, but I could see the strain on him, same as it was eating at me. We spent more time in hospitals than at home. Treatments, tests, more treatments. It was a whirlwind that didn't seem to end. One day, coming back from the hospital, Jake just broke down in the car. "Jennifer, this is killing me. Seeing him like this, it's too much." I grabbed his hand, squeezed it hard. "We'll get through it, babe. We have to. For Johnny." But it was tough. The disease, it's a monster. It'd retreat a bit, give us a glimmer of hope, then come roaring back. And Johnny, that poor kid, he never complained, not once. Kept talking about getting a puppy one day, when he got better. "I'm gonna name him Rocket," he'd say with this little smile. "'Cause he'll be fast like a rocket." It broke my heart, every single day. And then, after a year of fighting, just when we thought we might be seeing a bit of light, it was over. Johnny passed away. After Johnny passed, the house was suffocating, filled with too many echoes of laughter and footsteps that would never sound again. The emptiness was a physical ache, a relentless pressure against my ribs. I spent days, then weeks, tangled in bed sheets, the world outside continuing without a hitch, and it seemed so wrong. Jake, he tried to reach me, his voice a lifeline thrown into the murky waters of my sorrow. "Jennifer, love, you gotta eat something," he'd say, his hand hesitant on the door, his silhouette a shadow against the light. "I'm not hungry," would be my muffled reply from the depths of our bed, the blankets over my head like a shroud. He'd sigh, the sound heavy with his own grief. "Okay, but I'm here, alright? Whenever you're ready." But ready didn't seem like it was ever going to be part of my vocabulary again. How could I be ready to face a world that no longer had Johnny in it? One evening, he came home from work and found me sitting on the floor in Johnny's room, surrounded by his toys and books. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down next to me, his presence a steady warmth. "Jennifer, talk to me," he finally whispered, picking up a model airplane Johnny loved. "Please, babe." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "Why? It doesn't bring him back." "Nothing does. He should be here, Jake. He should be playing and laughing and driving us crazy. Not this." Jake wrapped an arm around me, pulling me against him. I know. It's hell, Jennifer. But we're in this together, okay? You're not alone in this." Days turned into weeks, and I started to move again, robotically at first. The house needed cleaning, groceries needed buying, life's mundane rhythms waiting for no one, not even a grieving mother. Susan, Jake's mom, started dropping by, always with too much food and an abundance of kindness. "Jennifer, you need to keep your strength up," she'd coax, her voice gentle, pushing a plate of something homemade and hearty towards me. "I'm really not hungry, Susan. But thank you." I'd manage, the food a lump in my throat. She never pushed too hard, just sat with me, her company a quiet reminder that the world hadn't completely forsaken me. "When you're ready to talk, I'm here. Until then, we eat or we sit, whichever you need." It was during one of those silent sit-downs when I found the words bubbling up, surprising even me. "He was supposed to outlive us, Susan. It's not right." Her eyes, so like Jake's, filled with tears. "No, it's not right. But it's what happened. All we can do now is live for him, make sure we remember the joy he brought us, not just the pain." "Feels like betraying him, moving on," I admitted, the guilt a chokehold. "It's not betraying him, Jennifer. It's honoring him. You think he'd want his mom this way, stuck and suffering? He'd want you smiling, laughing." Hard to imagine laughing ever again. I mumbled, the very thought of joy a betrayal in itself. She squeezed my hand. Maybe not today, or tomorrow. But you will, one day. And it'll feel like Johnny is laughing with you. Gradually, her words, Jake's unwavering support, they started to make a dent. The grief was still there, a vast ocean, but now I had boats in the form of family and friends, keeping me afloat, steering me towards a horizon that promised some semblance of peace. I started stepping outside, the sunlight harsh after so long in the dark. I returned to work, the routine a scaffold, holding me up, giving structure to days that otherwise blurred into one another. One afternoon, Jake found me in the garden, my hands deep in the earth, planting. "Look at you," he said, a small smile breaking through. "Never thought I'd see the day." "Me neither," I replied, looking up at him through strands of hair matted to my forehead. "But here I am." "Yeah, here you are," he echoed, kneeling next to me, his hand over mine in the dirt. "Together, always, right?" "Right," I nodded, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, we could make it through. It had been a year since we'd lost Johnny. Jake and I were slowly finding our footing again, and somehow, life seemed to inch back towards a semblance of normality. One Sunday, his parents invited us over for a family dinner. It was supposed to be a regular gathering, or so I thought. We arrived at Mike and Susan's place around 6 p.m. Dinner was lively, with all the usual banter and the familiar, comforting smell of Susan's cooking. That's until Sarah and her husband Tom arrived. "Jennifer, Jake, how's everything?" Sarah asked as they walked in, her voice never quite reaching warm. "We're getting by," Jake replied, giving me a quick squeeze on the shoulder. We all sat down to eat, the table laden with dishes that made my stomach growl, despite the undercurrent of tension. It was during dessert that things took a turn. Sarah, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly put her fork down with a clink that drew everyone's attention. "So, I'd been thinking," she started, her eyes darting around the table, settling on me. Now that Johnny is gone, what are you planning to do with his education fund?" The room went still. I felt Jake stiffen beside me, and Susan's eyes widened in shock. "What did you just say?" Jake's voice was low, dangerous. Sarah, unfazed, continued. "The money Grandma set aside for Johnny. He won't need it, obviously. It could really help Liam with college next year." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My face felt hot, my palms sweaty. "Are you seriously asking this now, Sarah?" "Well, why not? It's practical. Money sitting there doing nothing doesn't help anyone, Jennifer." Jake was seething now. "It's our money, Sarah. Grandma gave it to Johnny, which means it stays with us. End of story." "But he's dead, Jake." Sarah's voice rose, sharp and cold. "Why keep money for someone who's not here?" "That's enough," Mike interjected, his voice stern. "You're out of line, Sarah." Tom tried to touch Sarah's arm, but she shook him off. "What? We're all thinking it. I'm just the only one saying it out loud." "No, you're the only one thinking it," I shot back, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's not just money, Sarah. It's the last thing his grandmother gave him, a part of her love for him. Love doesn't pay college fees, Jennifer. Be sensible." Sarah snapped back. Jake slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. "My sister or not, you're talking about my son. Our son. Show some damn respect." Tom finally spoke up, trying to calm the waters. "Maybe we should discuss this some other time, not at the dinner table." Sarah scoffed, pushing her chair back. "Whatever. When you all come back to the real world, let me know. Until then, enjoy living in your fantasy where money grows on trees." She stormed out, with Tom following her, casting apologetic glances our way. There was a heavy silence after they left. Susan got up, her hands shaking as she started clearing the table. "I'm so sorry, Jennifer. I don't know what's gotten into her." I shook my head, feeling numb. "It's not your fault, Susan. I just can't believe she'd say that. Not now. Not about this. We said our goodbyes, and the drive home was quiet. I leaned my head against the window, the streetlights blurring past. It was one thing to deal with the loss of Johnny, but facing such coldness from Sarah was a different kind of pain. How could family, blood, be so cruel? After Sarah's brazen proposal at dinner, I was livid, but once I cooled down, my mind started racing. Jake's grandma had given a similar amount to Sarah for Liam's education. So, where was that money? Curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself scrolling through Sarah's social media late one evening. The more I clicked, the clearer the picture became. There were Sarah, grinning in designer dresses, flaunting new jewelry, all dating back to around the time we lost Johnny. It was like a punch to the gut. "Jake, come look at this," I called out, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice as I flipped through Sarah's posts on my laptop. Jake peered over my shoulder, his brow furrowing. When did she start living like this? Right after Johnny, after we lost him, I muttered, the timeline too perfect to be a coincidence. I couldn't let it go. The next day, I called Melissa, a friend who often got caught in the middle of family drama, hoping she could shed some light. We met at a little diner where nobody would bother us. "So, have you noticed Sarah's spending spree?" I prodded, trying to sound casual. Melissa stirred her coffee, looking uncomfortable. "Yeah, it's hard not to. But did you know? Right after your boy, passed away, she seemed really happy. Said she came into some money." "Happy?" My voice cracked. "Melissa, that money was supposed to be for Liam's college." Melissa bit her lip, glancing around before leaning in closer. "Jennifer, I shouldn't say this, but she blew through Liam's college fund. Bought herself all sorts of stuff. She figured you'd end up giving her the money Johnny didn't get to use." I went straight home and told Jake everything. Watching his face cloud with anger and disbelief, I knew this was going to blow up. "We need to tell my parents," he said decisively. "Now." We drove to his folks' house, and Jake laid it all out for Mike and Susan, who listened in stunned silence. "This is serious, Mom, Dad. Sarah spent Liam's education fund on herself and planned to claim Johnny's after." Jake's voice trailed off, choked with emotion. Susan covered her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. "Oh, my God. How could she?" "We need to confront her," Mike said sternly, a hardness in his eyes I'd rarely seen before. Half an hour after we got home after talking to Jake's parents about the money, Sarah showed up at our door, her face twisted in rage. Before I could even greet her, she barged past me into the living room. "You've got some nerve, Jennifer," she spat, her eyes wild. "Accusing me in front of everyone. You think you're so perfect?" "Sarah, you need to leave. Now," Jake said firmly, stepping between us. She ignored him, her voice rising. "I had every right to that money. It was just sitting there, and I spent it on myself, and now my boy needs money for college. It's not like your son." She paused, her lips curling into a sneer. "It's not like he needs it anymore." I felt a cold fire ignite in my chest. "How dare you?" I hissed, my hands balling into fists. "You speak about my son, about his memory, with such disrespect?" Jake grabbed her arm, pulling her towards the door. "Get out, Sarah. I won't warn you again." But she yanked her arm free, standing her ground. "You'll regret this, both of you. I'll make sure of it," she promised with a venomous look. Without another word, Jake pushed her out and slammed the door shut, locking it. We both stood there, breathing heavily, hearts pounding in the silence that followed. The dreadful moment came just a few days later, the day that would have been Johnny's birthday. I went alone to his grave to lay some flowers and spend some quiet moments, but what I found there stopped me in my tracks. Johnny's grave was desecrated, the flowers trampled, the small mementos we'd left smashed and scattered. I fell to my knees, sobs wrenching from my throat, a raw, hollow pain tearing through me. When Jake and his parents found out, they were devastated. Jake held me close as I told them, his arms tight around me, his own grief mingled with mine. Who could do such a thing? Susan whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. The answer came sooner than we expected. The police reviewed the cemetery's surveillance footage and found that it was Sarah who had vandalized Johnny's grave. Tom, Sarah's husband, was furious when he heard what she'd done. He told us he was filing for divorce, unable to stomach her cruelty any longer. "I can't be married to someone capable of this. I'm sorry for everything," he said, looking broken. The breach was too great, the act too vile. From that day, none of us spoke to Sarah again. Life after everything that happened with Sarah was like walking out of a long, dark tunnel into the light. Me and Jake, we were exhausted but together, trying to piece back a normal life from the shattered bits of the past months. One cool morning, I was sipping my coffee, staring out the kitchen window, when Jake came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You okay, babe?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. I leaned back into his chest. "Yeah, just thinking. It's been a hell of a year, hasn't it?" That's when I felt it, a tiny flutter in my belly. I'd been keeping a little secret, unsure of the right moment to share it, but now it felt right. "Jake, I've got something to tell you. I'm pregnant," I said, the words lifting some of the heaviness that had settled around us. Jake's reaction was instant. His eyes widened, then he broke into the biggest grin I'd seen in months. "Really? For real?" "Yeah, for real," I laughed, the sound bright in the quiet morning. He lifted me off the ground, spinning me around, before setting me down and pulling me into a fierce hug. "This is the best news, Jen. We're gonna have a baby." As the news settled in, we started planning. The spare room would need to be turned into a nursery, and there were a million things to buy and prepare. But more than the logistics, we talked about how we wanted to raise our new child, how we wanted to be his parents. "We'll do it right," Jake said one evening as we looked through baby books. "Teach him or her everything Johnny taught us." The pregnancy wasn't just a new beginning for us, it brought a new energy to everyone around us. Susan and Mike were over the moon, their excitement a balm on the still tender wounds left by Sarah's actions. "Another grandchild to spoil," Susan would say, her eyes twinkling. "And this one's gonna have the best guardians." Even Tom, who had been through his own storm, found solace in the joy of our growing family. "It's a fresh start for all of us," he said one afternoon as he helped Jake fix up the nursery. "Yeah, it is," Jake agreed, hammering away at a piece of stubborn furniture. "We're putting the past behind us, for good." And we did just that. As my belly grew, so did our hope and our resolve to build a family filled with love and devoid of the shadows that had plagued us. When our daughter, Lily, was born, it felt like the first truly clear day after a relentless storm. Holding her in my arms, looking into her curious, bright eyes, I felt a peace I hadn't known in a long time. "Welcome to the world, Lily," I whispered, her tiny hand gripping my finger. "It's not perfect, but it's beautiful, and it's yours." Jake, standing beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, looked down at Lily and then at me. "We did it, Jen. We're really doing it." "Yeah." I smiled up at him, my heart full. "We really are." As I watched Lily sleeping peacefully that night, a thought crossed my mind, linking the past with our future. "One day, when you're a little bigger, I'll get you a puppy, just like your brother Johnny dreamed of," I whispered to her. "We'll call him Rocket, fast and free, just like his dreams." In that moment, it felt like the circle was completing, a new chapter beginning with a nod to what we cherished and lost. Hey everyone, I'm Eleanor. I've hit 67 this year, and just as I thought I'd start relaxing, life tossed me another curveball. But let me backtrack a bit to set the stage for this whole drama. I've spent a good part of my life with George, my husband of over 40 years. We've had our ups and downs, but we stuck together through everything. Then there's our son, Michael. He's been the light of our life. Ever since he was a little boy, scribbling on the walls with crayons, we knew he had something special. Despite knowing the starving artist cliché, we never stopped him from chasing his dream to paint. It wasn't easy, mind you. Money was tight, and the uncertainty of his next paycheck was always looming over us. When Michael turned 30 last year, he dropped the news he was getting hitched to Lucy, his girlfriend of just about a year. We were thrilled, honestly. Lucy seemed nice enough, quiet but polite, and she made our boy happy. That was good enough for us. We went all out for the wedding to give them a day to remember. The first hint of trouble came subtle as a sledgehammer. Lucy had her heart set on a ridiculously expensive wedding dress, something that screamed more demand than request. "Eleanor, I just found the perfect dress," she'd said, flashing her phone with a picture of a designer gown that cost more than what we spent on our first car. "Lucy, honey, that's a bit steep, isn't it?" I tried to keep my voice light, but my stomach was doing somersaults. "It's my special day, Eleanor. I want to look stunning. You understand, right?" Her tone wasn't mean, but there was a sharpness there that you couldn't ignore. So, I caved. "All right, we'll figure something out." And we did. It set us back a pretty penny, but the look on Michael's face when he saw her in that gown, I told myself it was worth it. After the wedding, we helped them get settled into a cozy apartment downtown. Rents aren't cheap, but we didn't want them starting their married life in some dingy hole in the wall. I remember that morning clearly. The sun was shining, but not too hot, a perfect spring day. George and I were in the middle of enjoying our second cup of coffee when Michael called. He sounded more excited than usual, and I knew immediately something big was up. "Mom, Lucy and I have some news," Michael blurted out before I even had a chance to say a proper hello. "What's the good word, son?" I asked, my heart starting to race a bit. George put down his newspaper, giving me a look that said he was thinking the same thing I was. "We're going to have a baby," Michael announced. You could hear the smile in his voice. It was one of those moments that just fills a room with joy, even through a phone line. "Oh, Michael, that's wonderful news," I exclaimed. George was grinning from ear to ear, nodding in agreement as if Michael could see him. "Thanks, Mom. We wanted you to know first. We're telling Lucy's parents tonight." I turned to George, mouthing, "We're going to be grandparents." And he just chuckled, shaking his head in happy disbelief. That afternoon, I decided to visit Michael and Lucy to congratulate them in person and maybe talk about how we could help out. When I got there, Lucy was sitting on the couch, looking a bit pale but happy. "Congratulations, dear," I said, giving her a gentle hug. "You okay? You look a bit tired." "Thanks, Eleanor. Yeah, just a bit of morning sickness, nothing major," Lucy replied, managing a small smile. "That's normal, honey. Anything you need, just let me know," I offered, feeling that rush of excitement about being a grandma. "Actually, since you mentioned it," Lucy started, hesitating a bit. "I was wondering if you could help out around here sometimes? With the baby coming, things are going to get a bit hectic." "Of course, dear. You know I'm here for whatever you need. Cleaning, cooking, you name it," I said, eager to be involved. Lucy's response was a bit more direct than I anticipated. "Great, because I can hardly keep up as it is." And with the baby, her voice trailed off, leaving the sentence hanging with an unspoken expectation. I reassured her. "Say no more, I'll come by a few times a week and help out." "How does that sound?" "That sounds necessary," Lucy replied, not exactly overflowing with gratitude but clearly relieved. On my way home, I couldn't shake a twinge of concern. Lucy's words, "that sounds necessary," echoed in my head. It wasn't the warm thank you I'd expected. But I brushed it off, telling myself I was just being overly sensitive. After all, she was pregnant and probably overwhelmed. True to my word, I started helping out at Michael and Lucy's place the very next week. I'd sweep in with my bag of cleaning supplies and a casserole or two in hand, ready to lighten their load. Michael was always so grateful. He'd give me a big hug and say, "Mom, you're a lifesaver." Lucy, on the other hand, wasn't so easy to please. After a few visits, she started picking at the details. "Eleanor, you missed a spot there on the counter, or this casserole is a bit bland, isn't it?" Her words stung a bit more each time. It was clear she was taking my efforts for granted, and her occasional thanks felt more obligatory than genuine. I kept my frustrations to myself, mostly. After all, I was there for my son and my future grandchild, not for praise. But it was hard not to feel a bit used when even your best efforts are met with criticism instead of appreciation. It was a Tuesday, a day like any other, when I headed over to Michael and Lucy's apartment to do some chores and drop off some homemade chicken soup. I thought it might help Lucy with the nausea she'd been having. I'd just finished up cleaning the kitchen and was setting the soup on the stove to warm when Lucy came shuffling in, looking worse for wear. "Oh, Lucy, you don't look so hot today. Why don't you sit down and I'll get you some of this soup? It'll make you feel better," I said, trying to be as cheerful as possible. Lucy grimaced, holding her stomach, and muttered, "I hope it's better than last time, Eleanor. That soup didn't sit well with me at all." I was taken aback, but kept my tone light. "I'm sorry to hear that, dear. I made sure to use all fresh ingredients this time, just in case." Lucy slumped into a chair, eyeing the pot as if it might bite. "Well, we'll see. Last time I was sick all night. Michael had to stay up with me." Now, I knew for a fact there was nothing wrong with the soup I made last time. But I bit my tongue, not wanting to start a fuss. "Let me get you a small bowl, and you can see how you feel," I offered, ladling out some soup. She took a tentative sip and then another. "It's okay, I guess," she conceded, though her tone was less than grateful. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound being the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall. Suddenly, Lucy clutched her stomach and let out a groan. "Oh no, not again," she gasped, her face twisting in discomfort. I jumped up, my heart racing. "What's wrong? Do you need me to call Michael? Or a doctor?" "No. It's your damn soup. It's making me sick again," she shouted, pushing the bowl away so forcefully it nearly toppled off the table. I felt a flash of anger, but swallowed it down. "Lucy, I assure you, the soup is fine. Maybe it's something else? You've been having morning sickness." "No, Eleanor. It's your cooking. You're trying to poison me or something." Lucy was on her feet now, her voice rising with every word. I stood there, stunned. "Poison you? Lucy, why would I ever do such a thing? I'm here to help." Lucy's eyes were wild, her breathing heavy. "I don't know, but I can't trust you. You and your old-fashioned ways, always meddling. I need you to leave. Now." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, my mind reeling. As I walked down the hallway, tears stung my eyes. How had it come to this? I'd only ever wanted to help. The day of the baby shower arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. Despite everything, I was determined to make this a special day for Lucy and the baby. I had spent weeks planning and picking out what I thought were perfect gifts: soft blankets, cute baby outfits, and even a handmade quilt I'd spent nights sewing. "George, do you think she'll like what I picked out?" I asked while packing the car with the gifts. I couldn't help but worry after everything that had happened. George, always trying to keep the peace, gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Ellie, anyone would be lucky to get your gifts. They're from the heart. Don't fret." We arrived early to help set up. The venue was a pretty little hall decked out with balloons and banners proclaiming, "It's a boy." Michael greeted us at the door, his face lighting up when he saw the pile of gifts we brought in. Lucy was already there, fluttering around and directing decorations with a few of her friends. She seemed in good spirits, which eased some of my tension. "Hi Lucy, need a hand with anything?" I offered, hoping to break the ice a little. She glanced over, a quick once-over that didn't quite hide her impatience. "No, thanks, Eleanor. We've got it all under control. Just enjoy the party," she said, a bit dismissively. Finally, the time came. Lucy sat down, a mountain of gifts around her, and the room quieted down. She started with ours, probably out of courtesy since we were the grandparents. She unwrapped the first package, pulling out the handmade quilt. I held my breath, watching her face for any sign of approval. "Oh, this is quaint. Thanks, Eleanor," she said, the word quaint hanging awkwardly in the air. The room was silent for a moment, then filled with polite applause. My heart sank a bit, but I kept my smile. "You're welcome, dear. I made it myself, thought the baby might like it." The next gift from us was opened, a set of baby clothes. Lucy's reaction was more of the same. "Cute," she said flatly, barely glancing at them before setting them aside. By the time she got to the last one, the blankets, my hopes weren't high. "Oh, more homemade stuff. Right, thanks." Her words stung, and I felt my cheeks burn. Then, as if the disappointment wasn't enough, Lucy held up the blanket, making sure everyone could see, and announced loudly, "Eleanor clearly has no taste at all. Next time, just give me the money to buy something nice." The room fell silent, and I felt every eye on me. The embarrassment burned hotter than a summer's day. I stood there, rooted to the spot, not sure how to respond. George was at my side in an instant, his arm around my shoulders. "Let's not let this spoil the day," he whispered, though I could hear the anger in his voice. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Right, let's just get through this." As the party continued, I felt like a ghost, barely there. Michael came over later, looking embarrassed. "Mom, I'm really sorry about that. Lucy's, well, she's got her own way of doing things." I forced a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. "It's okay, Michael. Let's just focus on the baby." Even with all the tension, I kept going back to Michael and Lucy's apartment to help out. I couldn't just sit back knowing they might need me, even if every visit was harder than the last. It was one of those mornings when I brought back a heap of laundry, freshly washed and dried, ready to be put away. I was folding and sorting everything into the right drawers, trying to make things a bit easier for them. As I was tucking away the last of Lucy's blouses into her drawer, I didn't hear her come in. The door slammed, making me jump, and there she was, staring at me like I'd just robbed a bank. "What the hell, Eleanor? You think you can just dig through my things like it's nothing?" Her voice was sharp, and her eyes were blazing. I put the blouse down slowly, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "Lucy, I was just putting away the laundry. I thought I was helping." "Helping? By snooping around my personal stuff? That's not helping, that's crossing the line." She was shouting now, and I could hear the anger boiling over. I tried to keep calm, though it was getting harder. "I wasn't snooping, Lucy. I swear. I do this all the time. I just thought." "Well, you thought wrong. Stay out of my things, got it?" She cut me off, her words slicing through the little piece we had left. I backed off after that. But seeing how she lived started to eat at me. She'd stopped working, spent her days on the couch watching TV shows or shopping online for all sorts of things. One day, curious and a bit concerned, I asked, "Lucy, how are you affording all these new things?" She didn't even pause her scrolling. "Michael's doing really well, selling lots of his paintings online. We're fine, Eleanor." "That's good to hear, but maybe think about saving some of that. For the baby's education or something?" Lucy laughed, a harsh sound that filled the room. "His education? Please, that's your family's issue. Michael's making good money because he's talented, not because of anything else. You guys owe me, big time, especially since I'm carrying your heir." Walking out of there that day, I felt heavier than I had in a long time. The drive home was a blur of green lights and honking cars, but I couldn't shake Lucy's words. When I got home, George could tell something was wrong. "What happened, Ellie?" he asked, concerned. I shook my head, weary to the bone. "It's Lucy. She thinks we owe her for having the baby. Like it's some kind of business transaction." George's face hardened, and he took my hand. That's nonsense, Ellie. You know that, right? We don't owe her anything. I nodded, trying to muster a smile. I know, but it doesn't feel great hearing that from your daughter-in-law. After the baby was born, I thought maybe things would start to look up, that maybe Lucy would settle into motherhood once she held her son. But it just didn't turn out that way. Lucy seemed more irritable than ever and didn't bother hiding it from anyone, not even me. One morning, not long after the baby came home, Lucy showed up at my doorstep, unannounced, with the baby in his carrier. Eleanor, I need to catch up on some sleep. Can you watch him today? Maybe your place is quieter, she said, her voice edged with exhaustion. I was worried but agreed. Of course, Lucy. Go get some rest. We'll be fine here. I thought maybe it was just new mother fatigue, but it became a pattern. Lucy would drop off her son at the slightest excuse, saying she needed to meet friends or just to have some me time. And when she was with him, it was as if she couldn't bear the responsibility. More than once, I arrived at their apartment to find the baby crying in the next room while Lucy lay on the couch, absorbed in some show, completely tuning him out. One day, the reality of the situation hit me harder than ever. I walked in as usual and heard the baby crying. I hurried to his room and what I saw stopped me dead. Lucy, standing over the crib, her face contorted in anger, slapped the baby. He wailed louder, and my heart broke. I rushed in and scooped him up, glaring at Lucy. What are you doing? You can't treat a baby like that. Lucy sneered at me. Oh, please. It was just a light tap. He needs to learn to stop crying over nothing. That night, I talked to George and Michael, my voice thick with worry. We need to do something. This isn't normal behavior. Lucy might be struggling with something serious. Michael looked defeated, the lines deepening around his eyes. I know, Mom. I thought it was just stress, but this is too much. We decided together that Lucy needed professional help. We even found a psychologist and made an appointment, but Lucy refused to go. She claimed she was perfectly healthy and accused me of trying to turn Michael and the family against her. It's nothing personal, Lucy. I tried to explain one last time over the phone. We're worried about you, and we just want what's best for you and the baby. Her voice was cold, clipped. I told you, I'm fine. This is just you, Eleanor, always finding fault where there is none. You can't stand that I don't need your constant meddling. I was at a loss, feeling more alone in this fight than ever. I hung up the phone, my heart heavy. How do you help someone who doesn't want to be helped? How do you protect a child from his own mother's indifference? I needed to have a serious talk with Lucy. I knew it wasn't going to be an easy talk. After everything that had happened, things had reached a boiling point. I took a deep breath, prepared my phone to record the conversation, not to spy, but just in case I needed to remember what was said, or if things took a turn for the worse. Lucy, we need to have a serious talk. I started, my voice steady. It's about your responsibility as a mother and how you're handling things. Lucy rolled her eyes, clearly not in the mood. Here we go again. What now, Eleanor? You going to lecture me on how to be a mom? It's not just about being a mom. It's about what's right for the baby. You can't keep threatening to cut us off from him every time something doesn't go your way, I said, trying to keep the frustration from my voice. That's when she snapped. Oh, so it's like that, huh? You think you can just come here and tell me how to live my life? How about I just don't let you see him at all? How would you like that? Her words were sharp, and she pulled out her phone, dialing Michael. With tears in her voice, she began, Michael, you need to hear this. Your mother just hit me and she tried to take your son away from me. My heart stopped. Lucy, that's not true. Why are you saying that? She ignored me, continuing her tearful tale to Michael. You need to do something, or me and the baby are leaving. You need to choose, Michael. It's me and your son or them. I was in shock, barely processing what was happening as I heard Michael's confused voice trying to calm things down, suggesting they talk later. Lucy hung up, a smug look on her face. "See? You'll never see them again if you don't do what I say. Give me $100,000, or it's over." I was stunned into silence. This wasn't just a threat, it was outright blackmail. Before I could gather my thoughts, the baby started crying from the other room. Instead of tending to him, Lucy shouted at him to shut up and refused to change his diaper. That was it. The last straw. I couldn't take it anymore. "This is wrong, Lucy. You can't do this. It's not right," I said, my voice quivering with anger and despair. "Oh, just shut up and leave if you don't want to help," she snapped back. I left the apartment, my heart breaking with every step. What had just happened? How had things gotten so out of control? That evening, the phone rang. It was Michael, his voice heavy with sadness. "Mom, I'm so sorry, but Lucy's made up her mind. She says it's best if you don't come around anymore. I don't know what else to do." In the background, I could hear Lucy's angry shouts, declaring they were cutting all ties with us. It felt like a nightmare. I hung up the phone, numb. If that's what they wanted, then maybe it was best to let them see the reality of their decisions on their own. I told myself that I had done everything I could. From that day, I stopped all financial support. No more paying for their apartment, no more money for groceries or baby care. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, but I needed them to face the consequences of their actions without us to fall back on. 2 months of silence had passed before Michael and Lucy unexpectedly showed up at my doorstep. The look on their faces was grim, and Lucy didn't waste any time. As soon as I opened the door, she demanded, "You need to start paying the apartment rent again. Michael's paintings aren't selling, and we're in trouble." Once we were all seated, with George beside me for support, I addressed them both firmly. "We're not going to continue paying for your apartment. You both decided to cut ties, remember?" Lucy looked shocked, perhaps not expecting this stance. Michael's eyes were downcast, he seemed embarrassed. "And there's more," I continued, feeling a mix of anger and relief at finally speaking my mind. "I've been managing the online sales of Michael's paintings. I'm stopping that as well. It's time for you both to take full responsibility." Lucy's face hardened. "You can't do this to us. We have nothing without your help." "That was your choice when you decided to push us away," I replied. "Also, I'm going to seek legal advice about the custody of my grandson. Your behavior has been completely out of line, Lucy." That's when I turned on the recording on my phone that captured one of our last conversations, where Lucy had demanded $100,000 from me. I played it aloud. George and Michael listened, horror growing on Michael's face as the reality of Lucy's actions sank in. After the recording ended, Michael finally looked up, his decision clear. "Lucy, this is over. I want a divorce. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to live under the same roof with someone who treats my family like this." She stormed out, cursing as she went, standing in the rain in the parking lot, yelling back at us. It was a heartbreaking scene, but there was also a sense of justice in seeing her true colors revealed so clearly. In the following weeks, Michael followed through with the divorce and took steps to ensure his son's safety. Lucy was eventually deprived of her parental rights due to her unstable behavior, and she moved to another city. Once the dust had settled, I invited Michael and my grandson to move back in with us. Our home became a place of healing and new beginnings. Michael soon organized an exhibition at a private art gallery. To everyone's delight, it was a tremendous success. His art, reflecting deep emotions and a journey through personal turmoil, resonated with many. Now, our home is filled with laughter and the joyous noise of my grandson playing. I spend every possible moment with my grandson, teaching him, loving him, ensuring he feels the security that was momentarily threatened. I've always believed in making my own way, so living solo in this bustling city, just a stone's throw from where I work as an editor at a large book publishing, has been perfect for me. My folks, bless them, are just a phone call away, but here in the city, it's all on me. This one Saturday, needing a break from the usual, I decided to swap out manuscripts for some fresh air and headed to the nearby park. It's my go-to spot for some quiet, usually. I was lost in thought, maybe more than I should have been, because I didn't see the bike path up ahead. "Watch out." That was the first thing he said to me. I jumped back just in time as this guy on a bicycle screeched to a halt right where I would have been a second later. "Jesus, lady, you trying to get yourself killed?" he snapped, catching his breath. He was clearly annoyed but also seemed relieved that he hadn't hit me. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking. Are you okay?" I stammered, feeling like a complete fool. "Yeah, I'm fine. No thanks to you, though. You gotta watch where you're going." His tone was harsh, but his concern seemed genuine. I know. I just zoned out. "Thanks for stopping in time," I replied, feeling my cheeks heat up. He ran a hand through his hair, looking a bit calmer. "Alright, no harm done, I guess. But maybe keep off the bike lane, huh?" "Deal," I said, managing a small smile. "I'm Jenna, by the way." "Tom," he said, offering a hand, which I shook. "So, Jenna, always this distracted, or is it just my lucky day?" "Only on Saturdays," I quipped back, feeling a bit more at ease. We both laughed, and somehow, that awkward start turned into coffee at the nearby cafe. Turns out, Tom worked at a car sales company. He was straightforward, kind of blunt, but funny. We talked about everything, from books, which he admitted he didn't read much of, to cars, which I knew nothing about. It was easy, simple conversation, the kind where you suddenly realize hours have passed. "Didn't think I'd end up spending my afternoon with the woman who almost wrecked my bike," Tom said as we stood up to leave. "And I didn't think I'd be thanking the same guy who called me a killer on our first chat," I shot back, laughing. "Well, guess we're both full of surprises. Can I see you again, Jenna? Maybe on a day when you're not in the path of moving vehicles?" I nodded, smiling. "I think I can arrange that." Over the next few weeks, Tom and I started seeing each other more often. At first, it was just casual coffee dates and walks through different parts of the city. He had a rough way of talking, but it grew on me, felt real and down to earth. Before I knew it, these friendly meetups turned into late-night talks, dinners at places that became our spots, and slow, revealing conversations about our lives. There was something about Tom that felt familiar and exciting at the same time. I was drawn to his blunt charm, and from those ordinary meetings, an affair began. The more things progressed with Tom, the more inevitable it became that I'd meet his folks. They lived in the suburbs, a nice big house with a yard and all. Tom had warned me his mom was a bit traditional, but I wasn't prepared for just how much. We pulled up to their house, and right from the start, it was clear his parents had been eagerly waiting for us. His mom, a robust lady with a warm smile, welcomed us at the door, enveloping Tom in a big hug and giving me a once-over that felt a bit too long. "Jenna, dear, it's so nice to finally meet you. Tom has told us so much about you," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt more like she was trying to figure out my dress size than welcome me. "Thanks, Mrs. Harper, it's great to meet you too," I replied, trying to match her warmth. We sat down in the living room, and Mrs. Harper wasted no time diving into the conversation. "So, Jenna, Tom tells us you work at a publishing house. That must be exciting, handling books all day." "It is, Mrs. Harper. I love my job. It's fulfilling to be part of the creative process," I said, glancing at Tom, hoping he'd help steer the conversation. "That's nice, dear. But you know, once you two settle down, you'll need to think about what's really important. Family should come first, and a woman's touch in the home is irreplaceable," she said, not missing a beat. Tom's dad, who had been quietly observing the exchange, chimed in with a nod. "Absolutely. A stable home is the foundation of a good life. Right, son?" Tom shifted uncomfortably but managed a nod. Yeah, Mom, Jenna's really great at managing her time though. She's pretty organized and sharp. Well, of course, but managing a home is different, you know. It's a full-time commitment, his mom countered, fixing her gaze on me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. I cleared my throat, feeling the need to defend my position. I believe it's possible to balance both, Mrs. Harper. I think a modern family can have two working parents. It's all about teamwork, isn't it? Mrs. Harper smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, dear, that's a nice thought. But in reality, children need their mother. And a house needs a woman's touch, not just a quick sweep. The conversation drifted to other things, but the seed had been planted. Dinner was served, and it was like sitting in a minefield. Every compliment about the food felt like a veiled suggestion for me to take notes. Jenna, do you cook often? Mrs. Harper asked as she served a perfectly roasted chicken. Sometimes, when I can. Work keeps me pretty busy, I replied, trying to keep it light. Ah, well, you'll find great satisfaction in keeping your family fed and your house in order. There's a rhythm to it that's quite fulfilling, she explained, passing the mashed potatoes like she was handing down wisdom. Tom kicked me under the table lightly, a silent signal to not get riled up. I just smiled, sipping my wine a bit more than usual, thinking about how this dinner was more an interview than a meal. Tom and I decided to tie the knot after a year of dating. Despite the reservations I had from meeting his parents, love, as they say, makes you hopeful. We planned a modest wedding, just close family and friends, nothing fancy, just how we both wanted it, or so I thought. The wedding day was a blur of smiles, flowers, and a small crowd of well-wishers at a local community hall we'd booked. It was quaint, draped in simple decorations, and there was an air of excitement, or maybe that was just my nerves. The ceremony was short and sweet. We exchanged vows, rings, and a kiss that sealed the deal. Everyone clapped, and it felt right, at that moment at least. At the reception, while we were munching on finger food, Tom leaned over and said, "So, I was thinking about our next steps, about moving into a bigger place." I nodded, munching on a celery stick. Sure, we talked about needing more space. What did you find? There's this great apartment, bigger and really nice. It's actually near where I grew up, he added, watching my reaction closely. Near your parents? I asked, trying not to sound too concerned. Yeah, it's convenient, and Mom and Dad would be thrilled to have us close by. Plus, Dad mentioned he could help us out with the rent for a bit. I paused, thinking about the constant visits from his mom I'd have to endure. That's generous. But, Tom, you know how I value our independence. I don't want to feel like we're not on our own. Tom squeezed my hand. I get it, Jenna, but think about it. It's a good financial move, and it'll be nice to have family nearby, you know, for when we decide to start our own. I wasn't convinced, but decided to give it a shot. Okay, we can try it. But if it feels too crowded, we need to reconsider, alright? Deal. Tom smiled, and we went back to entertaining our guests. Moving in was a hassle. The apartment was indeed spacious and had a lovely view of a nearby park, but it was also a 40-minute drive from my work, which added to my daily commute. Tom's parents, true to form, were over often. His mom came by with housewarming gifts, which were really just ways to imprint her taste on our decor. Jenna, dear, I brought you some nice curtains, much better than those drab ones you picked out, she said one afternoon, holding up a garish set of floral curtains. Thanks, Mrs. Harper, but I actually like the ones we have. I tried to keep my tone light. Oh, but these will brighten up the living room so much more, she insisted, already walking over to change them. The tension was palpable each time she visited, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. Tom did his best to mediate, but it was clear that his idea of close to family and mine were worlds apart. Over time, the topic of how we should live our lives began cropping up more frequently. Tom increasingly expressed his preference for traditional family roles. Jen, think about it. You managing the home, me bringing in the cash, it just makes sense. He'd argue, his voice firm as if that settled the matter. But look at this, I'd respond, pulling up our budget on my laptop. 2 incomes, especially now with everything that's going on, pandemics, economic dips, it just makes more sense. We're more secure this way. Tom would shake his head, clearly frustrated. That's not how a family should work. It's not just about money, Jenna. But it is about stability, Tom. And us both working doesn't mean we can't have a great home life. I tried to reason, but it felt like talking to a wall. Meanwhile, Mrs. Harper practically turned our apartment into her second home. She was over all the time, and every visit felt like an inspection. Jenna, you're not thinking of staying in that job forever, are you? She'd start as soon as she walked in. I'd barely have my coat off, and there she was, questioning my life choices. I actually enjoy my work, Mrs. Harper. It's important to me, I'd say, trying to keep my voice steady and polite. She'd tisk and start prowling around the apartment, her fingers sliding over surfaces, looking for dust. Well, if you were home more, maybe this place would be cleaner, she'd say, holding up her dusty finger like it was evidence in a trial. It's clean enough. We live here, it's not a museum, I'd shoot back, feeling my patience thinning. But she'd already be on to her next inspection point, flinging open the refrigerator to critique my grocery choices. This isn't enough food for a healthy meal. And look at these leftovers, don't you cook fresh? She'd complain, her nose wrinkling in disapproval. I tried talking to Tom about it. Your mom is overstepping, and it's stressing me out. I can't keep up with her expectations. Tom, ever the peacemaker, would sigh. She's just trying to help, Jenna. Maybe if you were home more, things wouldn't be so tense. One evening, after a particularly hard day at work, I came home to find Tom in a foul mood. This place is a mess, Jenna. And dinner's it's not up to par, he said, poking disdainfully at the pasta I had whipped up. I'm doing my best, Tom. I'm working full-time and trying to keep up with the house. But it's never good enough for you, or your mom, I snapped, frustration boiling over. Well, maybe if you weren't trying to do both, you'd actually do one right, he shot back, his words sharp and cutting. I was taken aback. Are you saying I need to choose between my job and our home? If you can't handle both, then yes. Maybe you should just be a housewife. Honestly, if things don't change, I don't see how this can work out, he threatened, his tone cold and serious. I felt a chill run down my spine. The man I loved was giving me an ultimatum that felt like a noose tightening around my neck. Be a housewife or bust. It was clear that the life I had built, my career, my independence, was slipping through my fingers the more I tried to cling to it. The tension in our home was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tom and I were at a breaking point over my career and our lifestyle. I loved him, deeply, so I made a choice that I thought could smooth things over. I went to my boss and laid it out. I was quitting to be a full-time housewife. My boss was shocked, disappointed even. He knew how much my career meant to me. But then he offered a lifeline, remote work. I could still edit, only from home. It wasn't ideal, but it felt like a compromise I could live with without completely losing myself. I didn't tell Tom about the remote work arrangement. Instead, I told him I had quit my job to focus on our home. His face lit up in a way that both warmed and broke my heart. That's great, Jen. It'll be better for us, you'll see, he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like he was clinging to a newfound peace of mind. I threw myself into the role of housewife, handling the chores, cooking meals, and making sure everything was just right for when he came home from work. But as soon as he left for work each morning, my laptop opened, and I was back at my editor's desk, remotely. The balance was precarious, juggling my secret work life with the domestic life Tom believed I had embraced. I funneled the money I earned into a separate account. It seemed smarter to have a financial cushion that Tom didn't know about, just in case. Living on just Tom's salary was his idea, and it strained our finances more than he realized. Just 3 months in, the cracks began to show. We're running low on everything, Tom. We need to rethink our budget. I approached the topic one evening, hoping for a rational conversation. What are you talking about? You're just not managing our money right. You need to cut back on spending. He snapped back, frustration lacing his words. His words stung. I hadn't bought anything for myself in ages, always hunting for deals and scrimping wherever I could. I've been as frugal as possible. It's not enough, I insisted, my voice tight with hurt. The next day, as if on cue, Mrs. Harper showed up at our door. Tom told me you're having trouble with the budget. Let me show you how to shop properly, she declared, her tone brooking no argument. The following days were a crash course in extreme penny pinching. She dragged me to the store, pointing out the cheapest items, many of which were of questionable quality. These are what you should be buying, Jenna. None of that fancy stuff, she instructed, her voice harsh as if I was a wayward child. She even showed me how to dilute dish soap to make it last longer, her eyes sharp. You'll learn to make do with less. It's good for you, she said, nodding to herself more than to me. Every receipt was scrutinized, every expenditure questioned. Why did you buy this? You don't need to be traveling around when there's work to be done here, she scolded when she saw a bus ticket stub. It was more than just saving money, it felt demeaning, like I was under constant surveillance. Living this way, under the strict rules dictated by Tom and enforced by his mother, was stifling. One afternoon, I locked myself in the bedroom and called my mom. Mom, I don't know what to do anymore, I started, my voice cracking a bit as I explained how Mrs. Harper had been teaching me to stretch every dollar to the extreme, making me feel like I was living in the Great Depression. That's not normal, Jenna, my mom said firmly. You're supposed to be partners. It sounds like she's trying to control everything. And Tom should not be letting this happen. I sighed, feeling a small wave of relief just hearing her say it. I know, Mom. It's just so hard. I try to stand up for myself, but it always turns into a huge fight. Just as I was about to say more, the bedroom door swung open. Tom stood there, his face twisted in anger. He had overheard me. Without a word, he marched over, grabbed the phone from my hand, and ended the call. A wife shouldn't be complaining about her husband and mother-in-law like some kind of traitor, he snapped, his voice cold and harsh. I was stunned. Tom, I was talking to my mom. I needed someone to talk to. That doesn't give you the right to badmouth us. Especially not to your mother, he retorted, his eyes narrowing. The argument spiraled from there, voices raised, words that couldn't be taken back. In a huff, Tom stormed out, slamming the door behind him. He was gone for the rest of the day, leaving me alone with my thoughts, which were a tangled mess of sadness and frustration. It was well past midnight when I heard the key turn in the lock. Tom stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. His usual stern demeanor was replaced by a sloppy, cruel drunkenness. I should have listened to my mom. She warned me about marrying someone like you. He slurred, his words like daggers. I stood up, my own anger rising. Tom, you're a grown man. Stop letting your mother run our lives. You don't need her approval for every little thing. That seemed to set him off even more. If you're so unhappy, why don't you just leave? He yelled, stepping close, his voice booming in the confined space of our apartment. It's 3 a.m., Tom. It's not safe, I replied, trying to reason with him even as my voice shook. I don't care. Get out, he shouted, not even looking at me. I hesitated only for a moment before I started to pack the essentials, my phone, some clothes. When I went to grab my wallet, Tom snatched it from my hands. I earned this money, Jenna. You have no right to it, he said, venom in his tone. Panic surged through me, but then I remembered my own account, my secret safety net. I called a taxi and left without looking back, Tom's angry shouts fading behind me as I closed the door. I found a temporary shelter in a nearby hotel. The morning after leaving Tom, I was up early, my mind racing with all that needed to be done. The first stop was a lawyer's office. It was a small, unassuming place, but the lawyer, Mr. Edwards, was sharp and kind. He listened as I laid out everything that had happened, nodding in understanding. "We'll get the divorce papers drawn up right away. You have rights, Jenna, and we'll make sure you're protected," Mr. Edwards assured me, his voice firm and confident. Armed with my newly drafted divorce papers, I returned to the apartment where Tom and I had lived. The place was silent, the remnants of last night's chaos evident in the strewn bottles and Tom's snoring form on the couch. He hadn't even made it to the bedroom. I began packing my things quickly, stuffing clothes, books, and personal items into boxes and bags. The reality of leaving this chapter behind felt both liberating and heavy. As I zipped up the last suitcase, Tom stirred on the couch. "Jenna? Hey, can you grab me a beer?" he mumbled, still half asleep, not even noticing the suitcases. Instead of a beer, I placed the divorce papers on the coffee table in front of him. "Here's what I can give you," I said, my voice steady. Tom blinked, slowly coming to. He picked up the papers, scanning them, a smirk appearing on his face. "What's this? You're serious? Come on, Jen. You'll come back. Just say sorry to me and my mom, promise to follow the rules, and we can forget all this." I couldn't help but laugh, a short, bitter sound. "No, Tom. I'm not coming back. Not now, not ever. This is goodbye." I left the apartment, the door closing behind me with a click that sounded like the locking of my past. I moved into a rented apartment that afternoon, a small place, but mine alone. Returning to work full-time at the office felt like stepping back into a world where I was in control. The familiar buzz of the office, the clack of keyboards, and the scent of coffee brewing, everything reminded me why I loved my job. I also reconnected with my friends and my parents, rebuilding the bridges that had been strained during my turbulent marriage. Catching up over long dinners and weekend brunches, I shared laughs and stories, feeling the strength of these relationships that had weathered so much. One late afternoon, as I was wrapping up a manuscript, my phone buzzed. Glancing at the screen, I saw a name I hadn't expected, Claire, a close friend from the city who had been my sounding board through the worst of times. "Hey Claire, what's up?" I answered, smiling as I heard her enthusiastic voice. "Jenna, I'm so glad I caught you. Listen, a few of us are getting together this weekend at that new cafe downtown. You have to come. It's been ages, and everyone's dying to see you." The cafe meetup turned out to be just what I needed. Laughter, updates, and a gentle nudge back into the social world. It felt good to be among friends, to share stories and listen to theirs, feeling the camaraderie that I'd missed. As the gathering wound down, Claire caught me by the arm as we were leaving. "Hey, how are you really doing, Jen?" she asked, her gaze piercing, but kind. I took a deep breath, letting the truth surface. "I'm getting there, Claire. It's been tough, but I think I'm finally moving forward for real." A few months into my new old life, my phone rang while I was reviewing a particularly challenging manuscript. The screen flashed Tom's name. Taking a deep breath, I answered, my voice cool and collected. "Jenna, hey, I need to talk to you." Tom's voice came through, hesitant and a bit desperate. "What is it, Tom?" I asked, not really in the mood for pleasantries. "Well, I got fired," he blurted out. "And things are tight. I was wondering." "You need money." I finished for him, not surprised by the turn of the conversation. "Yeah. And, well, I was thinking maybe we could start over, you know? If you apologize to my mom and me, and we could try again. You could take care of us." His voice was hopeful, almost pleading. I couldn't help it, I burst into laughter. The idea was so ludicrous it took me a moment to gather myself. "Tom, you're joking, right? You want me to apologize, support you, and come back to all that mess? You've ditched your principles pretty fast, haven't you?" There was a silence on the other end. "So, is that a no?" "Yes, Tom, that's a no. A big one," I replied, still chuckling at the absurdity. "I'm doing well, really well actually, and I'm not about to give up my freedom and happiness for another round of whatever that was." Hanging up, I shook my head in disbelief. The call was a stark reminder of how far I had come and how much I had changed. I was free, truly free, and it felt liberating. I turned back to my manuscript, a smile playing on my lips. The idea of jumping back into a relationship wasn't appealing at the moment. I was enjoying my independence too much, savoring the peace that came with it. I'm Dr. Elaine Harper, but most just call me Elaine these days. After decades of saving lives, I now shuffle papers at a local hospital and consult the occasional greenhorn doctor. But today's not about any of that. Today, I'm preparing to meet Sarah, my son Michael's fiancée. While my usual place is being renovated, I'm holed up in this small, unassuming rental. It's nothing fancy, but it's cozy enough for a temporary spot. I decided to whip up my famous apple pie. Nothing wins people over like a homemade pie, right? The doorbell rang just as I pulled the pie out of the oven. Wiping my hands on my apron, I headed over to open the door. There stood Michael, looking as handsome as ever, and beside him, Sarah. She was as pretty as Michael had described, with a look about her that was both striking and, somehow, calculating. "Mom, this is Sarah," Michael introduced, his voice filled with pride. "Nice to meet you, Elaine," Sarah said, offering a hand that felt a bit too stiff. "Please, come in. I hope you're hungry. Pie's just out of the oven," I smiled, stepping aside to let them in. Sarah stepped inside, her eyes quickly scanning the modest living room and kitchen combo. I caught that little furrow in her brow as she took it all in, the second-hand furniture, the outdated kitchen cabinets, and the plain walls desperately in need of a paint job. "It's cozy," she finally said, a polite smile not quite reaching her eyes. "So, Elaine, Michael tells me you work at the hospital? What do you do there?" "Oh, just some administrative work these days," I replied, brushing off the real weight of my career. "No need to throw my achievements around." Michael shot me a surprised look. "Mom, why don't you tell her about?" I cut him off with a quick wink and began slicing the pie. "Never mind that. Let's have some pie. You'll love it, Sarah. It's my special recipe." As we sat down, Sarah seemed more interested in probing than eating. "So, how did you manage to send Michael to private schools and all? It must have been tough on just a hospital admin's salary." The question caught me off guard. It was too direct, too prying, and it irked me a bit. I steadied my voice. "Well, I had some help from my parents, a little nest egg they left me." I could tell she was sizing me up, trying to piece together how someone with a simple job had a son with such an upscale upbringing. Her questions felt more like an interrogation, each one delivered with a sharpness that was slightly disguised under a veneer of politeness. Michael, bless his heart, seemed oblivious to the tension. "Sarah's been great with all the tech support at her job. You should see her in action, Mom." "That's impressive," I said, turning to Sarah with a genuine interest now. "Technology really is the future, isn't it?" "It is. And it's so rewarding to be on the cutting edge, to be involved in something that really makes a difference," Sarah replied, her tone a mix of pride and something else I couldn't quite place. We continued to chat over pie, the conversation meandering from Michael's job to their wedding plans. I did my best to make Sarah feel welcome, despite the rocky start. As they left later that evening, Michael hugged me tight, but Sarah's goodbye was cool, her smile a practiced curve that didn't quite warm her eyes. As I washed the dishes, I made a mental note to keep a closer eye on things. Michael was my world, and I'd be damned if I let anyone mess with his happiness. After that first awkward meeting in my modest rental, I had hoped things with Sarah would smooth over. But as the wedding planning picked up speed, so did the tension between us. Sarah had a way of sidestepping my attempts at involvement with a sort of polite iciness that left me feeling outside of my own son's future. One afternoon, Michael and Sarah dropped by to discuss some of their wedding arrangements. I had made some coffee and set out a few snacks, trying to make the atmosphere as welcoming as possible. "Mom, we were thinking of picking a venue by the lake. What do you think?" Michael asked, spreading some venue photos across the coffee table. Before I could answer, Sarah chimed in. Oh, Elaine, it's a bit out of the city. I'm not sure if some of our guests would appreciate the distance. We're thinking more of a downtown spot, right, Mike? Her tone was casual, but her words cut me off before I could even weigh in. I tried to keep my voice even. The lake sounds lovely, Michael. It'd make for beautiful photos, and a bit of a drive never hurt anyone. Sarah laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. Oh, but you know, traffic can be such a headache. And we wouldn't want our guests spending half the day on the road. I bit my tongue on a sharper reply, instead forcing a smile. Well, downtown is nice too. Plenty of great places there. Michael looked between us, picking up on the tension but not commenting on it. He always hated conflict, especially between the people he loved. Right, well, Sarah's been looking into some great downtown venues. Haven't you, babe? He said, giving Sarah a supportive smile. Absolutely, she replied, flipping her hair over her shoulder. And Elaine, we were also thinking of a modern theme for the wedding, very sleek, very elegant. I assume you'd prefer something more traditional? Her glance flicked over my dated coffee mugs and worn tablecloth, her words dripping with unsaid judgment. I clenched my jaw, feeling the sting. I like modern just fine, I said. The important thing is that you two are happy with it. That's sweet of you, Sarah said, her smile tight. We're just aiming for something a bit more current. It's all about the image, after all. As they continued to discuss details, I found myself nodding along, but my mind was elsewhere. Sarah's every word seemed designed to edge me out, to underline how little she valued my input or presence. After they left, the silence in my apartment felt heavy. I was used to being alone, but this felt different. This was isolation within my own family, a door being softly but firmly closed in my face. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the window, watching the streetlights flicker on. My heart was heavy with a mother's worry. I had always been the one Michael turned to, the one who helped him navigate life's choppy waters. Now, it seemed, Sarah was steering the ship, and she was taking him in a direction I wasn't sure I was welcome. Just have to watch and wait, I muttered to myself, taking a sip. But I'm not out of this game yet. Not by a long shot. It was Michael's birthday, and despite the cold chill in our relationship, I wasn't going to miss my only son's celebration. Sarah had taken the reins, organizing everything, and somehow, my invitation got lost in the shuffle. But a mother's place is at her son's side, especially on his birthday, so I went anyway. I arrived at Michael's house with a small, carefully wrapped gift in my hands. The place was bustling, laughter and music spilling out the door as I approached. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding in my chest. It was one thing to crash a party, another to crash your son's party uninvited. Sarah opened the door, her smile fading a bit when she saw me. Elaine, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you. Her words stung, but I kept my composure. Wouldn't miss my son's birthday. Where's Michael? He's around somewhere, she said, stepping aside reluctantly to let me in. Well, come in, I guess. The house was decked out in blues and grays, a posh, modern look that screamed Sarah's touch. I moved through groups of people, none of whom I recognized. They were all Sarah's friends, young and trendy, the air filled with their laughter and the clinking of glasses. Finally, I found Michael, chatting with a group of people who looked to be colleagues from his work. Michael, I called out, my voice catching a bit. He turned, his face lighting up when he saw me. Mom, you made it. He excused himself and came over, giving me a big hug. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I said, handing him his gift. Happy birthday, honey. Thanks, Mom. I'm so glad you're here. He looked genuinely happy, but there was a hint of confusion in his eyes, as if he was trying to figure out why I'd say such a thing. Sarah appeared beside us, her smile tight. Michael, your friends were asking about you, she said, then turned to me. Can I get you a drink, Elaine? No, thanks, I'm fine, I replied, feeling out of place with her polite but cold demeanor. As the evening wore on, I tried to mingle, but Sarah's friends were a tight-knit group, and I felt like an outsider. Every conversation felt strained, with Sarah often interjecting to steer Michael away or dominate the discussions with tales of her work accomplishments and plans for their future. At one point, I overheard her talking to a friend, her voice just loud enough for me to catch. Yeah, it's a bit awkward that she showed up. I didn't think she'd come, given, the vibe. The words were like a slap. I wasn't just uninvited, I was unwanted. My presence was making her uncomfortable, or worse, embarrassing her in front of her circle. The realization was a bitter pill, and I found myself retreating to a quiet corner, nursing a drink I didn't remember accepting. Michael found me a little while later, his brow furrowed. Mom, are you alright? You seem a bit off. I forced a smile, not wanting to ruin his day with my feelings. Just a bit tired, that's all. It's been a long day. Do you want to stay longer, or would you like me to drive you home? His concern was genuine, but the last thing I wanted was to drag him away from his friends. No, you stay. Enjoy your party. I'll catch a cab, I said, standing up. I just wanted to see you and wish you happy birthday in person. He hugged me, looking worried. Thanks for coming, Mom. I love you. I love you too, baby. Always. With that, I slipped out, the sound of laughter echoing behind me as the door closed. The night air was cold, but it was a relief compared to the warmth of a party where I was clearly an outsider. It was a crisp morning, just one day before Michael's wedding. I was in my kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound breaking the silence, when I heard a knock at the door. Expecting it might be the delivery, I wiped my hands on my apron and headed to answer. To my surprise, it was Sarah, standing there alone, her face set in a serious expression that didn't bode well. Sarah, what brings you here this early? I asked, managing a polite tone. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her eyes scanning the modesty of my rented apartment with thinly veiled disdain. Elaine, I'll get straight to the point. I'm here to make things easier for everyone. I have a proposal for you. Oh? I replied, curiosity piqued, despite the chill settling in my veins. She pulled an envelope from her sleek, oversized purse and held it out to me. I'm offering you $1,000 to not attend the wedding tomorrow. We think it's for the best. I stared at her, dumbfounded, not from the shock of her audacity, but that she dared think this would be acceptable. And why would you think I'd accept such an offer? Sarah's lips twisted in a frown as she responded, let's be real, Elaine. Your presence might not mesh well with the kind of event we're planning. With all the important guests coming. My hands clenched at my sides, but I knew I needed to handle this cleverly. I'm sorry, I think I didn't hear you correctly, I lied, tapping my ear like I often did when I pretended not to hear something inconvenient. You want to pay me to not attend my own son's wedding, because... With a sigh of annoyance, Sarah repeated louder. Because, Elaine, you don't exactly fit the scene. You dress and, well, everything about you, it's just not up to par. We have very influential people attending, and we can't have you there, looking like you do. She paused, perhaps expecting some kind of hurt or resignation from me, but I stood firm, my resolve hardening. Keep going, Sarah. I'm listening. And with this money, she continued, waving the envelope, you can maybe fix up this place or get something nice to wear some other time. You should be thankful I'm offering this. I nearly laughed at her nerve. She thought this apartment was mine and that I needed her charity to spruce it up. But I kept my expression neutral, nodded, and took the envelope. All right, Sarah. If that's what you really want. Her relief was palpable as she gave a tight smile. Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. After she left, I closed the door gently behind her, my hands trembling with a cocktail of anger and adrenaline. I took out my phone and stopped the recording. Her words, clear and unmistakably cruel, had been captured in full. I picked up my phone and dialed Michael, my voice urgent yet clear. "Michael, can you come over right now? It's important. We need to talk about something serious." "Sure, Mom, I'll be there as soon as I can." "Is everything okay?" His voice was filled with concern, and I could tell he sensed the gravity in my tone. "Just come, we'll talk when you get here." When Michael arrived, he looked worried. He barely sat down before I said, "Listen to this," and played the recording of Sarah's proposition. The color drained from his face as he listened, his expression morphing into one of shock and hurt. "Mom, I'm so sorry you had to hear that. I can't believe she'd say those things," he stammered once the recording ended. "The wedding is tomorrow, Michael. What do you want to do?" I asked, my voice soft but firm, needing him to make the next move. He ran his hands through his hair, a sign of his frustration and confusion. "I want to confront her, tell her it's over, and cancel the wedding. I can't marry someone capable of this." I held up a hand, stopping him. "If you do that now, everyone will see you as the bad guy, and she'll play the victim. We can't let her narrative control the story." Michael paused, taking in my words. "So, what do we do?" "We need to show everyone her true colors. Let them see the Sarah I heard on this recording." My voice was calm, but carried the weight of my resolve. He nodded slowly, understanding the plan. "Okay, Mom. I won't say anything to her yet." After Michael left, I made several phone calls to old friends and former patients, people who knew me well and had been part of my life thanks to the surgeries I'd performed over the years. We talked about old times, and I hinted at needing their support, though I didn't dive into specifics over the phone. Sitting back on the couch, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. Tomorrow would be a significant day, one way or another. I was ready to defend my family's honor and show everyone the kind of person Sarah really was. It wasn't just about stopping a wedding, it was about protecting my son from a life of manipulation and deceit. The wedding day arrived with a mix of nerves and a heavy sense of duty. Today would be a turning point, one way or another. As guests settled into the beautifully decorated hall, whispering excitedly about the day's events, I prepared myself for what was arguably the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. The plan was simple but devastating. Just before Sarah and her father were to make their grand entrance, a video showcasing the couple's journey together was scheduled to play. Instead, I had arranged with the AV technician to play the audio recording of Sarah's cruel proposition. My heart pounded as the moment drew near, knowing all too well the impact of what was about to be heard. As guests chatted and looked forward to the start, I signaled to the technician. The lights dimmed, and instead of the soft opening music of the couple's video, Sarah's voice filled the room, clear and sharp. "I'm offering you $1,000 to not attend the wedding tomorrow. We think it's for the best." You could hear the collective gasp, the murmur of confusion and shock as the guests processed the words. They looked around at each other, disbelief etched on their faces. Just then, the doors opened for what was meant to be Sarah's grand entrance with her father. The timing couldn't have been more poignant. The room fell into an uneasy silence as they walked in, her father unaware of the undercurrents, smiling and waving, while Sarah's smile faltered under the weight of dozens of eyes filled with sudden wariness and judgment. Without missing a beat, as they reached the front, I switched to the second part of my plan. The screen now showed a video montage of testimonials from prominent city figures, colleagues, and patients, all speaking to my years as a dedicated surgeon, the lives I'd saved, and my contributions to the community. The contrast was stark. Here was the proof of the life I had led, one of service and respect, directly countering Sarah's insinuations about my character and status. Sarah stood frozen, her face draining of color as the accolades rolled on. The guests, now completely turned against her, murmured amongst themselves, their expressions ranging from pity to disdain. Sarah's mother, sitting in the front row, had tears streaming down her face, her hands covering her mouth in shock. Sarah looked around helplessly, her earlier composure shattered. She had been exposed, her superficial judgments laid bare before the friends and family she had hoped to impress. As the revealing video ended, a hush fell over the room. It was a heavy silence, thick with the weight of revelations and shattered expectations. My son, Michael, took a deep breath and walked up to the microphone with a solemn expression. The room's attention was fixated on him, every pair of eyes filled with curiosity and concern. "I'm very sorry," Michael began, his voice echoing through the quiet hall, "that I didn't see the callousness and arrogance of my bride sooner." He paused, looking over the crowd with a regretful gaze. "I am canceling the wedding and I apologize to all of you for the inconvenience." He then turned to look at me, his expression softening. "Mom, I'm sorry. Thank you for everything you've done for me. Without you, I might have made the biggest mistake of my life." His voice cracked slightly, and my heart swelled with both pride and sorrow for what he was enduring. A murmur of support rose from the crowd, and a few guests stood up, applauding him for his courage. I felt a tear slip down my cheek as I watched my son, standing there, embodying the values I'd hoped to instill in him, a man of integrity and strength. At that moment, Sarah, who had been standing off to the side, burst into tears. "I didn't know about your mother's background," she sobbed, her voice desperate and pleading. "This changes everything. Please, Michael, can we just talk about this?" But Michael shook his head, his decision firm. "There's nothing left to discuss. It's over, Sarah." Even her own parents looked at her with a mix of shock and indignation, their expressions conveying their disappointment and disbelief at their daughter's actions. They had been caught in the uncomfortable position of witnessing their child's failings laid bare before a room full of guests. Seeing no way to salvage the situation, Sarah's frustration and embarrassment boiled over. "This is all your fault," she yelled at me, pointing a trembling finger in my direction. Her voice was raw, laden with emotion. "You've ruined everything." With those final words, she turned and ran from the hall, her sobs echoing behind her as the door slammed shut. The room was left in a state of shock, everyone processing the drama that had unfolded so unexpectedly. I moved to Michael's side, putting an arm around him. "You did the right thing," I whispered, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on us both. He nodded, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have gotten through this without you." As the guests slowly began to leave, offering quiet words of support or simply a squeeze of the shoulder, I felt a mix of relief and profound sadness. The day had not gone as any of us had envisioned, but truth and honesty had prevailed. Michael was hurt, but he was free from a future that could have been much more painful. After the storm had settled, I wrapped up the renovation of my house. It's beautiful now, a place filled with peace and light, much like the new chapter of my life. 2 years had flown by since that fateful day. Sarah, Michael's ex-fiancée, tried to reach out to me a few times, pleading for reconciliation. But after everything, how could I? I firmly told her no each time. Last I heard, she was fired from her job. Turns out her boss was at the wedding, saw everything, and wasn't too pleased. She moved out of the city afterward, and I don't know where she is now. In the meantime, life moved on in the best ways possible. I retired from my administrative role at the hospital, finally giving myself the break I deserved after years of service. Not long after, Michael met Anna. She's a breath of fresh air, a truly beautiful soul inside and out. They got married last spring, and it was the kind of wedding we'd always dreamed of, full of love, laughter, and genuine happiness. Anna respects me greatly, and our bond is strong. It's a relief and a joy to see Michael so happy and well-matched. Just the other day, over a quiet dinner at my place, Anna mentioned how much she values our relationship. "Elaine, I really admire how you handle everything with such grace. I'm so grateful for how welcoming you've been," she said, her sincerity touching my heart. "I'm just thrilled to have you in the family, dear. You make my son happy, and that's all I could ever ask for," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. Their kindness and love filled the house that had once echoed with too many silences. Now, it was a home in the truest sense, brimming with the promise of future gatherings and family milestones. Feeling lighter and more adventurous than I had in years, I recently made a decision that surprised even myself. I booked a trip around the world. I've always put it off, but now, with everything falling into place, it felt like the perfect time. When I told Michael and Anna, they were thrilled. "Mom, that's amazing. You've always talked about seeing the world," Michael said, his eyes lighting up. "Yeah, and you've more than earned it," Anna added, giving me a hug. "We'll manage just fine here. Go make some incredible memories." So, here I am, finalizing itineraries and packing bags, ready to explore the places I've only read about or seen in pictures. It feels like I'm not just traveling to different countries, but also towards a new phase of life, one where I can just enjoy and embrace the beauty of the world.